Start screen, go live. E adesso c'è la novità del go live. Perché ho abbandonato gli occhiali? Quindi iniziano loro?
Vuoi iniziare voi o...
Sì, puoi iniziare voi. Vi do il microfono a loro? Allora vi do il microfono? Ne abbiamo uno
Carino.
purtroppo.
Perfetto. Quanto distante lo devo così?
Ma c'è il cappello, non dovrebbe fare fastidio.
No, direi di no. Bene, saremo brevissimi perché poi vi lasciamo insomma ai vostri contenuti. E volevamo solamente darvi il benvenuto. Siamo in WeHunt, che è una società che si occupa di ricerca e selezione di personale. Questo edificio è Palazzo Bocconi ed è stata la residenza di Ferdinando Bocconi proprio negli anni in cui, prima del Novecento, quando poi ha diciamo fondato la famosissima Università Bocconi, per cui questo è un palazzo di rilevanza storica molto importante. Ovviamente noi siamo solamente in una sala qui dedicata per l'occasione, però insomma ci sono diverse ale in cui poi noi diciamo viviamo la nostra vita tutti i giorni d'ufficio, un po' come la vedete, un po' interattiva tra tavolini, ecco, sale riunioni sparse, non abbiamo come dire delle scrivanie uniche, ci piace un po' vivere l'ufficio in questo modo e questa è semplicemente insomma casa nostra. Per noi è molto bello potervi avere qui oggi perché quello che facciamo poi in particolare io e Eugenio nella divisione Information Technology ci occupiamo di ricerca e selezione proprio di profili professionali in ambito ICT, tipicamente diciamo volendo racchiudere tutti in una categoria anche se non è corretto, developers, per cui insomma a noi fa molto piacere poter ospitare questo meetup. Python è un linguaggio di programmazione multicolore, multiforme, multiverso, bellissimo e i campi di applicabilità sono veramente tantissimi e spesso ce lo raccontate e finalmente insomma oggi abbiamo modo di entrare anche noi un pochino più nel vivo, poi ci metteremo in un angolino però cercheremo un po' di seguirvi. Lascio un attimo la parola a Eugenio che vi spiega un po' meglio cosa facciamo. Ecco.
Esatto, grazie Giuliana, appunto mi fa veramente piacere potervi ospitare. Effettivamente siamo in una location dove probabilmente 100 anni fa più di 100 anni fa si parlava veramente di tematiche economiche o comunque di tematiche estremamente importanti e anche oggi andiamo ad arricchire ulteriormente queste mura, se potessero parlare, con dei contenuti significativamente importanti per tutti voi, ma per tutti noi in generale. Al di là di tutto, come WeHunt siamo nati come società di ricerca e selezione del personale circa 2 anni e mezzo fa. Facciamo parte di un gruppo dove abbiamo all'interno anche W Advisory e W Executive, quindi per profili sia executive, quindi con esperienza sicuramente importante. Prego, sì, assolutamente, prego. Abbiamo aperto diverse sedi, quindi siamo presenti sia in Italia, con le sedi appunto di Torino, di Vicenza, di Bologna, di Firenze, di Roma, di Bari e di Palermo, proprio per essere proprio capillari su tutto il territorio e ormai siamo più di 200 consulenti che lavorano all'interno della società. Abbiamo aperto anche delle filiali sia in Francia che in Spagna, UK e ovviamente Svizzera, anche perché bene o male il mercato sta richiedendo questo, un approccio anche molto costruttivo e di interazione con i nostri candidati, quindi il nostro target è proprio quello di cercare di non solo di effettivamente di andare a fare ricerca e selezione del personale, ma di interagire proprio con le persone. E a questo punto, a questo riguardo, mi fa veramente piacere potervi ospitare e non so se Giuliana tu vuoi aggiungere altro, altrimenti lasciamo a voi la
Non li vogliamo
parola.
annoiare ulteriormente, direi.
Esatto, direi che è più che sufficiente, quindi lascio
Buon proseguimento.
a voi la parola.
Okay, hi all. We do our meetups in English, so I switch to English. So Python Milano, proudly established in 2013, so more than 10 years of meetups here. And what we do meetups like this. Thank you to Wiant in this beautiful room here. It's really wonderful for having us. And we do Pybirra, which are informal meetups in pubs mainly. And we do also a podcast in Italian, in this case, Intervista Pythonista, where we interview some Pythonistas having fun solving very difficult problem with Python, let's say. So this is our main site. You can look at it with the browser milano.python.it, and here you will find all our links, especially the call for papers for Python Milano, which is this meetup, and PyData Milano, which is the other meetup we do in the third week of the month, let's say. Okay, thank you for our host, past host. Now we thank you, Wiant, for having us. Thank you to Python Italia that provide us the stickers and the microphone for the podcast, and also to Division Lab for for the YouTube streaming material. And we have also our fellow Alessandro, which is streaming. Okay, for April, we have we want to work on a new PyData Milano meetup in the third Wednesday of April. And a bunch of us will be present at PyCon Italia in Florence in May. And so if anybody of you will come to Florence, we will join again. Me, Pietro, and also Luca will be present. Okay, another announcement. This year we organized also a conference, Python for AI, which will be held in Pavia. And it will happen on 16th of March. And surprise, surprise, we will do a little raffle for 5 tickets for the conference. So if you are interested, you can contact us, and we will raffle those tickets for 5. Yeah, at the end of this event. Yeah, exactly. So now you are, you have to stay until the end.
But then you will have to come to the conference.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and surprise, surprise, we will have another raffle for some books that Roberto kindly provided us, which are basically part of his job. So there are basically fonts that he designs. And that's it. I will leave the microphone to Roberto. Thank you, and have fun.
How's the audio? 1, 2, 3. Does it work? Can you hear me? Yeah? Cool. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay, cool. Thank you for having me. I'm Roberto. I am a trained graphic designer and type designer, but I happen also to work with Python since 2010, so probably I'm a software developer nowadays. I work for Typotheque, which is a font foundry based in the Netherlands. And also I collaborate with RoboFont, a font editor developed by Frederick Berlijn in Ghent, like I don't know, 120 kilometers from The Hague, so just across the border. We have some books, and they will be distributed at some point during the event, and they're basically specimens of the catalog of fonts Typotheque distributes. They are a couple of years old, so they're not completely up to date with what we offer right now, but we have a growing catalog over the years. So, but they're, I think, a good snapshot of the main, most well-known collection of fonts Typotheque distributes. Okay. The technical side I already covered, but I also feel a little bit like a millennial cliche. I got into rock climbing a few years ago, and no family member, relative ever touched rock on mountains, and it's just something that apparently we all have to do for a while. And I took it with pretty seriously. As my sourdough baking, which started even before COVID, and I can't get enough of it. I think, I mean, my starter is basically a pet nowadays, and I can't kill it. No, I don't play paddle. No, it's not going to happen. I don't have that kind of reflexes, I guess. Okay, today I'll try to answer 3 questions. We'll see how I do. I don't have a timer, so please just do signs if I start to get a bit too late. So why is Python the scripting language for type design and font production? There's a little bit of a historical reason behind this. A small group of Dutch designers, Peter van Blokland, Erik van Blokland, and Jos van Rossum, started to work on a custom, let's say, font editor back in the 1990s. Peter van Blokland, the older of the group, had some experience working in a digitizing tool for fonts, like from, you know, drawings on paper. And he had I mean, they had a specific, peculiar perspective on what a font editor should look like and be able to do. But with the tools available at the time, starting application from scratch was not feasible for such a small group. So they got in contact with Altsys, and then I think it was already acquired by Macromedia, and they managed to get access to their obsolete code base of Fontographer version 3. Macromedia was already working on version 4, which was a complete rewrite in C++, but they needed a core and to, you know, build on top of it a few specific functionalities. And so they cooked what became a very influential application called RoboFog. And the most important and peculiar feature of this app was the fact that they quickly realized that type designers need a specific, I mean, some kind of freedom that cannot be formalized into user interface. And all the projects can be pretty different, and type designers tend to be quite opinionated about everything. I mean, spacing, kerning, and outlines, you name it. And being able to make one user interface working for everyone is not feasible. So as maybe some of you realized, one family name in the group is, you know, pretty famous in the Python ecosystem, because Jos van Rossum is the younger brother of Guido. And in the 1990s, he was already playing with Python. And since the Python interpreter is written in C, it was then possible to compile the two things together and to ship a font editor with a Python interpreter inside. I'll cut things short, but at the end of the millennium, most of the type designers moved to a richer application called FontLab. There was a lot going on in font technology at that time. Unicode was about to come in a little bit, OpenType technology, and the obsolete and old code base of RoboFont could not keep up. So FontLab happened, but this idea of having a scripting interface inside a font editor really caught with a lot of the designers out there. So the developer of FontLab, Yuri Jarmola, started to think about creating a scripting interface. And after meeting Jos van Rossum, who showed him like what was possible to do with RoboFont, he decided to basically ship FontLab version 4 with the low-level Python API. The same group of RoboFont, with the help of Tal Lemming from the States, then built on top of it a more Pythonic API wrapping the low-level functionality of the app called RoboFab. And this diagram, this kind of API is more or less what was happening back then in RoboFont, and it allowed designers and developers to move tools to a different environment with very little modifications and keeping like the main logic where it was. And the cool thing, and that I think it gives the idea of how important those decisions were at the beginning of the 90s. I will probably be able to run this code nowadays because the interface was well designed, and then it kept working. And we just don't use FontLab anymore, but you know, the kind of Python API, it's pretty much the same. And there was a lot going on still in the Python ecosystem for font development. Still, Jos van Rossum in 1999 released a package called Font Tools. And so all the stuff you've seen right now, in order to manage to edit data, you had to go through an application. So RoboFab was able to run in terminal with very limited capabilities. If you needed to, you know, remove overlaps or do operation on outlines, you always had to pass through the application. But then Jos van Rossum started to work on a completely independent open source system for editing binary fonts. And we still use this nowadays. And I mean, the tool itself was so important that Google, I think a decade ago, started to, well, I mean, a fork on top of the original code base by Yoast, which has become one of the cornerstone of the entire font development ecosystem we have out there. It's pretty, I mean, if you want to generate variable fonts, you need some of the stuff is contained into this package. And one of the things that allowed designers to do was to look into binaries and debug stuff. So there's this pretty famous utility, TTX, which takes a binary file, dumps it in an XML file, and allows you to look to what's actually saved inside, which, I still find it pretty remarkable, but back then was like, anyway. So working with application, of course, is cool because they do a lot of the dirty work at the low level side, but then you are kind of trapped inside a cage. And so FontLab was taking care of a lot of non-fun stuff to deal with in terms of development, but at the same time wasn't really a great application for solving a number of issues. Like kerning was always considered, I mean, to be not fun at all. I mean, it's a very repetitive task, and FontLab was not just up to it. So it started the idea in this group of designers that was getting even larger over time to create little apps that were able to just take care of one single task of the font development process. And but in order to do so, we needed a way to like move data in and out from basically FontLab. Back then it was still the main player. And so out of the same API I showed you before, a font format was actually born. And it's basically an interchange font source format is text-based. It's a collection of plist files. And it's still in use nowadays for most of the font production we have around the world. With this, of course, we got a conference because, you know, after a while, you need to meet people, discuss stuff, find standards, and do things. And it's probably one of the, I mean, it's personal taste, of course, but it's like one of the tech conferences with the coolest logo you could ever find. I mean, it's a bunch of designers geeking out on type and whatever. Then I think the circle that started in 1999 with RoboFont was at least completed in its first phase with the release of RoboFont. RoboFont is a pure Python application running on macOS through a PyObjective-C bridge. And it's a UFO editor, so it's well, the first and only 100% UFO editor, so it doesn't consider UFO to be like an interchange format of data. And it was, as I probably said, released in 2011 at the Reykjavik ETIPY, one of those type conferences happening around the world by Frederick Berline. I collaborate with Frederick in keeping like the ecosystem of plugins in good shape, updating documentation, and taking care of the relationship with the community. And this font editor brings, it has a specific philosophy, which is deemed by many as pretty radical. I mean, generally, an application tries to solve all the problems you may find in a domain, at least in one way or in a preferred way. And since this is pretty hard to obtain in the type design world, where, I mean, like users are particularly opinionated on how things should be run and happen and so on. Frederick decided to like focus on a number of very specific features, like having a great glyph editor and basic functionality for a few other things, but focusing a lot on having a very performant and easy to use API for building tools on top. And I've never seen an application that it's so easy to script and build stuff. And I know foundries that have probably as many lines of code on top of RoboFont for their own private ecosystem of tools. For example, in this case, Outliner is an extension released by Frederick. You can install it using Mechanic, the plugin manager I showed in the slide, in the previous slide. And this is probably a few hundreds line of Python code building the UI and taking care of drawing in the glyph editor. And this interacts very well, of course, with the entire user experience inside the app. So then finally, should designers code? I don't know. Maybe they could, or at least I like to think that they should be able to do it with the right tools. So we started to ask this question between ourselves. In this moment, I'm a designer. Since the publication of this book, maybe even before, but this was like opening a wider conversation about the relation between designers, computers, and programming. So Design by Numbers was a very influential publication. I don't know if any of you ever heard of it. And the ecosystem, the framework that it came with the book, I don't think it lasts long, but this idea of providing a creative coding framework for designers stayed, and two students of John Maeda, Casey Rias, and Ben Fry later, a few years later, developed and released processing, which is possibly the most known creative coding ecosystem out there. And in a similar way, the same Dutch designers I mentioned a while ago, they had a very clear idea in mind that designers should be able to write at least a few lines of Python to speed up their work, or being in control of repetitive tasks and boring issues in their practice. And so they developed their own processing, which is called Robot. It's a macOS app. It also comes as a package, so you can use it from command line. It is, again, through PyObjective-C, a bridge to the low-level macOS APIs as core image, core text, and I'm possibly missing something, core graphics. And it has a Pythonic interface, because I don't know if any of you had any experience with PyObjective-C. It's not fun at all. And Robot is fun. Robot is cool. And it started as an education tool. I mean, back in the days before Frederick did a complete rewrite of the app, he knew that basically it all fitted into a single Python module. And so then it grew in complexity, and other than being just an educational tool, it also became a full-fledged package able to automate graphics in a very powerful way. This video has been generated with Robot. It's an Eratosthenes sieve. So, and the algo itself is probably, I don't know, 25 lines, and the animation that comes with it is, I don't know, 30 more sitting on top. It's, pretty powerful for the amount of effort that it requires. And we use it everywhere in our tool chain for proofing, for drawing stuff, and we really don't like, it's really hard if you have like a specific workflow to hook it up with Adobe apps, which are, the standard, or at least they were. Let's see how it goes. Standard for graphics. And tools like this, they can be implemented anywhere. Okay, and so over the years, I picked up a number of tools, APIs, applications, and I started to write my Python code more fluently. And when I came back to Milano, actually when I moved back to Italy and I decided to settle in Milano, I had the opportunity to teach programming to graphic designers. Basically, I was out for a few years, and then when I came back, I mean, my mission was to teach whatever I learned abroad to fellow designers, and there was no clear path on how to mix the two things together. There was a lot of documentation and material for processing other languages and so on, but for this particular ecosystem, there wasn't much out there, and so I decided to cook my own manual for my students. And at the beginning, it was just a very long Word file, and then I decided, well, let's do the final piece missing. Let's publish it online and share it with other people. And of course, I was completely naive, and it's all wrong top to bottom, and I would never write it this way again. But well, I had a huge motivation for doing it, and I'm still proud of some of the chapters that are published there, especially this one on digital typesetting. I mean, I made experience of a lot of historical kind of stuff concerning typography in Belgium. I was working with Fred Smeyers. He's one of the most renowned scholars, other than being a type designer, on type founding during the Renaissance and really at the beginning of typography in the Western world. Anyway, so but of course I quickly realized that things were structured the wrong way. I was doing a big disservice to my students because I looked at things in a very kind of atomical way. And so today it's the day of the strings, and then we go from A to Z, and then we do all the methods, and with strings you can do this, you cannot do that, they are immutable. And it's really not the way I learned Python myself. I mean, you need projects, you need problems to solve, and it doesn't make much sense for me to teach someone else like dictionaries, top to bottom, hash maps, whatever. You have to, I mean, first of all, I believe, I mean, in my experience of teaching Python over the years, I have, I completely lost where I was. It's okay. Anyway, so I after a couple of years, it was during COVID, I guess, so it was maybe a bit more than 2 years, I started to write more real-world problem kind of articles and tutorials. This is, for example, the visualization of the HSL color system. Here we have a heat map of kerning data from a font, and or very specific kind of typesetting composition made with variable fonts for specimens. Now, in the last 10 minutes, which are probably 8 by now, I'll tell you a bit more what we use nowadays Python for. And it is a bit more than font production. And well, you don't have it with you now. You browse it later, but basically you get the scope of the library. We distribute somewhere around 8,200 binary files, and we are not a distributor. I mean, we don't take fonts from other people. This is just our own catalog. So it means that it's curated and produced and mastered in-house. And of course, Typotheque is going to be 25 years this year. So I mean, it's decades of work of hundreds of people. And we collect those binaries in what we call presentation, but that's kind of an internal jargon. People usually refer to those groups as font families. We have about 180 of them. But also at the same time, some of these families are collected in wider collections. And also differently from other independent foundries, we also work with scripts all around the globe. So this is a smaller group of collections that we consider to be global in a way. So for example, if you want to browse our catalog, knowing that a project you have to do needs to be typeset in Arabic, Cyrillic, Devanagari, Georgian, Greek, and Latin, you know that you can buy fonts from these collections and be sure that you'll be able to cover most of the languages that are served by these writing scripts. Just to give you another idea, this is a promotional image for November, which is the most global font we have in the catalog. And this was made for the release of the South Asian script collection of November. I think it was last year. Yeah. Okay, so font families starting from the 50s started to be more complex than just Roman and Italic. I mean, in the 19th century, maybe we were starting to get some bold, but the idea of conceiving a bunch of fonts to work together, having different, keeping the same style and formal identity, but some slight variation on some axes, really started with Univer. And of course, we are, with computers, we are bringing this to a whole different level. With variable fonts technology, we now can ship to users fonts mutating over multiple quantitative axes. So in this case, it's width and weight, but we have fonts that have different speeds of writing and so on. So we use Python for, of course, production, because with something like this, it's pretty hard to open like several sources and then click generate and type in names and stuff like that. Also because each of those binary files has a ton of metadata that comes from legacy platforms and stuff that Microsoft and Apple never got agreement on top and stuff like that. So it's not fun. It has to be automated to be feasible. I mean, also economically sustainable. And we need to show these fonts, and we need to show these fonts. We do this on our e-commerce, on our website, but still graphic designers like PDFs, like to be able to print stuff, compare them. And also we cannot really, we have to be kind of synthetic on the website. I mean, users can, of course, type their own text, but we need to have like situations where we can, run a lot of text and compare different weights and so on. And it's not an easy kind of typesetting. I mean, not many designers get in touch with, typesetting 12 different writing scripts in the same document. Can be an issue with InDesigns and apps like that. And the cool thing about Drobot is directly hooked into Cortex. So if Apple is able to typeset a certain kind of script in the right way, we are too. If that's not the case, usually it's pretty much edge cases, we can always go with RFBuzz, which is deemed to be more reliable in some cases. So just to give you an idea of the scope. And Greta Sans is not even comparable to November. November has a a table of content that gets here when it comes to writing scripts, and it's a massive document. And this is, of course, generated with robot. We also need to show OTL behaviors in order to, they are part of the interface of a font when you get substitutions based on the language set in the dictionary of the shaping engine, or simply knowing that you can switch from proportional to tabular figures in a font. We prove this kind of stuff, of course, in production. I mean, the specimen is something we share with users, but this happened on the font production stage. We typeset these documents for each binary that comes out of the pipeline. In this case, we are not, we use ArfBuzz in order to be like pretty much sure that we're doing the right thing, but also because sometimes we don't want to depend on the whole PyObjective-C and to be able to run this on Linux machines. So this runs on Drobot Skia, which is like a spin-off of Drobot, using like stuff that runs on Linux. This one. But the other is still Josfa Rossum. We write unit tests for these kind of behaviors. When complex contextual alternates, substitutions, they can get mixed up along the way while writing the Python code that generates the features. We also run unit tests, and basically we create a virtual shaping engine with a kind of a empty font that's just the minimal amount of information to run some typesetting. So then we feed it a string of text, and then we compare it against a sequence of glyph names that we expect to happen. And I'm pretty tight on the time, because otherwise I have a demo to show you, but maybe if the Q&A is not too crowded, we can have a look into that. And also lately, since this, I mean, imagine this to be a very small company with, you know, a little e-commerce distributing some fonts, and then over the years becoming, I mean, I'm sure some of you work in companies with huge databases and mainframes and rooms full of servers, but for us is a huge jump in scale, and being able to control things with so many little details changing over time, it's quite complicated. So our infrastructure is on GitHub, and the development, the mastering of these fonts happens in separate repositories where we group things based on how it works better for the project. And then we have a kind of centralized repo, and I'm in charge of it, which is called fonts. And this is a snapshot of the entire library. And it's, even though it's gigabytes of binary files, we find Git to be very helpful with this, because we can easily move back to older snapshots if we need. And so it also takes care of duplicates and removing legacy fonts where they're not needed with new releases and stuff like that. And it also comes with a nice Python API for queries. So when I have to typeset a specimen and I want to have all the styles and their location of disk for, I don't know, the chairman presentation supporting Greek, I have a query that gives me like the right stuff. But then when you move all this into servers, databases where, you know, user interaction, user data, when all this stuff is mixed, a lot can go wrong, seriously. So, for example, sometimes you get a lot of not deaf characters on the website when you should have fonts there. And this stuff happens all the time. So we also use Python to check. Basically, I dump on disk all the JSONs for the single pages, for example. Then I also get all the assets that are provided by the website, and then I match them with what I have in my centralized packages. So that's the general idea of, yeah, I think these are the main situations where we use Python in at Typotheque. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. The second mic line. Grandi. Okay. Thank you, Roberto. I think it was the most beautiful presentation we ever from a graphical standpoint. And any question from the audience for Roberto?
Hi. So first of all, thank you for the exposition of so many quirks of fonts. I wanted to ask one thing. So the use of Python here allows us to basically create parametric fonts in the term of variable fonts. From the point of view of what you're offering all the shades of a font because you can actually modify them parametrically in a certain way. I imagine you check each of them, but still.
Yes and no,
Yeah,
meaning
that's a
that
good translation.
yeah. So I guess this is the question.
No, actually no,
okay,
but
okay.
I would like the clarification
yeah.
first.
So generally, outlines are created by designers through user interfaces. I mean, we use scripting for tedious tasks like so the variable font thing. If we go back to this is easier. Yeah. So this is the Greta collection, and Peter, the author, he drew only this.
Okay.
This, and then it's interpolated.
That is parametric enough for my definition
Okay,
of parametric.
yeah.
That fits. But my question is, how complex from the design point of view and from the use of it would be to move from parametric to procedural? Because one thing I found very painful working with especially handwriting fonts is that it doesn't matter how many ligatures you can have in your font, it's never going to look good because eventually you will have the same letter twice. So the easiest thing I would do is just to like rotate and use multiple copies for each letter. But actually, for me, it would be lovely to be able to have within the font file, within the OpenType or OpenType 2 in the future, having some snippets of code I can write. So being able to direct the ending of one letter to another using my own logic, or even the kerneling using some, I don't know, gravity spring-based logic to implement the kerneling instead of doing it by hand, because I would never do it by hand anyways. How complex would it be to have a standard like that, and how complex would it be to hope that any software ever would actually implement it?
Okay, so this is in discussion right now for an update of the OpenType format, and it's basically the idea is to address an issue with particular style of Arabic that needs well, basically that has a cascade. I'm not an expert in Arabic script, but I explain it in my own understanding. That needs that has like a continuous cascading kind of shaping approach, and it's basically not set linearly. I mean, from right to left, but in a kind of diagonal kind of fashion. A kind of diagonal kind of fashion. And until now, it's not really possible to have this style digitized with what we have. And so there is a proposal for enhancing the OpenType format with some of these programming capabilities. But concerning handwriting font, there's also, I mean, for Latin especially, I might disagree, meaning that, I mean, the design can do a lot to solve part of this issue. I don't think it has to be completely programmed. I don't know, but technically it's not possible nowadays.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other question for Roberto?
Thanks for the great presentation. Since I have a font expert here, I would ask one question that I always ask myself. So how do I pick a font, or how can I decide for a font for a website or something?
So I make them. I'm mostly on in the analogy of the music industry. That's mostly known. I mean, I'm like on the mastering side of things. Well, I have completely I mean, there are some perceptive issues that you could take into account in terms of width. So I missed completely this side of things, but we also run some research at Typotheque. A colleague of mine, Hector, is maybe online. Ciao. Is neuroscientist, and we run experiments with our fonts to see if we actually manage to improve performance reading in different settings and environments. So there are some variables you can take into account based on support and environment and the kind of reading you have to do, like distance reading, setting of long text, and things like that. But besides that, quality is often taking fonts from small foundries that are known for doing, I mean, to have high quality standards, something like Typotheque, but there are plenty out there. And pay for the fonts, because as anything, if I mean, we can talk a lot about the contributions of Google to the font development ecosystem, but the Google Fonts library is not always the higher standard for quality in typography. Let's put it this way, personal opinion. So yeah, pay for the fonts, look for small foundries, groups, whatever, pick stuff you like. And I also have a lot of type designers friends, so I use their fonts because they they give me the fonts, and then I'm able to play with it.
So you can tell me which one of those was designed by you, and then I can use that.
Exactly.
Okay, any other question for Roberto? Okay.
Thanks. I was about to ask you a completely different question just before your last answer, but is there, I don't know, I can imagine it's not accessible to users, and then you spoke about kind of quality assurance about fonts, but is there something that would be able to tell us, to help us, maybe not accessible to us, but to someone, I'm looking for a font that is similar to the one that I see here, but better. Then better, of course, could be anything.
Well, I guess well, there's plenty of forums. I guess someone came up with some AI doing this kind of thing, but it's not that easy. It's not a photographic image. So there's plenty of forums. Font ID, I think, was one of the most active. So you post an image of a font, but even like a blurry photo of a book from the 1920s, and some nerd somewhere in the world will know which type founder made it. It was probably stolen from someone else. So I mean, they're pretty deep in their game there. Yeah, I would do something like this. And then another resource that I think could be helpful is a very rich website, which is called Fonts in Use. It's actually a catalog of specimen work of graphics where you get, you know, that lists all the fonts that are part of the image. So I don't know, a Backstreet Boys CD cover, you might find it there with the fonts that were actually used in the image.
Okay, thank you all. This was the last question because